Thanks, Sue, and thanks everyone for listening in today. And thanks, Ray and the team at NewMR for giving me the chance to talk about a topic I'm very interested in. And for those of you that don't know me, I've been a researcher now for coming up to 30 years, primarily in the client-side area. But recently I gave that up to become a person who helps people at the intersection of behavioural economics and research. And over the past 3 years, I've spoken to as many groups as I can because I think it's a really important area and an area that researchers need to get across. And the question I pose to you today is behavioural economics, is that a wolf at the door or is that opportunity knocking? And opportunity knocking, I hope so, given that's my side of the fence. So behavioural economics. So it's no longer a shiny new object, and it's fair to say that most researchers are familiar with behavioural economics and all the key terms. Back in 2012, when Tom Ewing won his award for the SMR Best Paper at Congress, that was an event that the behavioural economics community think was so important, or a key milestone, that they have put it in their history of behavioural economics, which has recently been released. But to me, the year before, I was judging at SMR, and there was a couple of BE papers that dealt with how we need to put this into our research space, and that had a key impact on me because I could see just how important behavioural economics is, because it deals with people, and that's really what researchers are. We're people that tell other people about people. And since that time, all researchers who attend conferences would have seen many conference events, like last year at the ANSRS conference, or this year, sorry. We had 2 sessions plus a workshop, and these presentations are well held and people really respond well to them, and people are drawn to them. And of course there's book after book after book. I finished one yesterday, I started another one today. I think you're all familiar with Predictably Irrational and Nudge and all the rest of them, and they just keep coming out. And of course in the research world we know the names Ariely and Kahneman and Thaler and Sunstein and all the other psychologists that are bringing this to the fore. And of course this is driven by the success of these nudge units that governments are setting up around the world. We know that in increasing organ transplant rates in Europe, there's driving up tax compliance in the UK, and the great success of the BIT team in the UK that is extended right across the world. We have BIT teams now in Australia, the US. Obama's managed to get in on the convincing people to vote using behavioural economics principles, and to the stage that he's actually issued a presidential executive order that BE should be leveraged. And there's multiple BIT teams in Australia. We have the Beta team, and of course it's not just governments, companies as well. So we're all subject to the BE interventions as the big companies grasp the possibilities and the success. So I'm sure that many of you are travellers like me, and we've been to the Expedia websites where you'll see things like this is the last room, or 20 people looking at this. They're all leveraging BE principles to try and drive traffic and drive the sales that they need. And of course, speaking of sales, McDonald's hamburgers, over 1 million sold, is leveraging social proof, and that goes way back before anyone had heard the term behavioural economics. And so in our space, in the research world, there's research-focused or BE-focused researchers such as Brain Juicer and the BE Architects, the Irrational Agency over in the UK. And in Australia now, we see our competitors in the management consulting industry such as PwC have behavioural economics units. And just recently, our biggest bank has set up an internal client-side BE unit. But the question remains, what does all this mean for the rest of us who are not using BE as our key driver? Is it a wolf at the door or opportunity knocking? So like in every profession, in the research world, it's a modern, fast-paced and disruptive times, and there's many wolves that we're subject to, some real, some imaginary. When I first started to get involved in research, it was primarily because information didn't exist. So if people wanted to find out information or get some information on a topic, they'd have to go to a researcher and we'd have to go and collect that data. But we live in the information age now. Our clients have many options. There's information overload, so they're all attention and time poor rather than information poor. So we need to provide clarity to be listened to. We need to provide certainty, yet all too often, things like this. I'm sure you're familiar with Donald Trump. Has success in the US, but the polls were all pointing to his campaign slipping away and in a death spiral. And of course, there's Brexit in the UK, and just recently, I think the polls were wrong in one of the elections that was just held. And some people were even talking that we should get our future predictions from a fellow like Homer seemed to be on the money there rather than the research polling communities. Let's get back. And as a researcher, I don't know how many times these two quotes were held up by our end clients, the marketers. So Steve Jobs never did research. And, as researchers, we all know that's not true. Or if Henry Ford was asking the customers, we'd end up with faster horses. These sorts of issues in wrong prediction or misinterpreted predictions and just the general tone calls our role into question. And even Dan Ariely, who I like a lot, if you see a few of his presentations, he's quite often talking about, from a behavioural economics perspective, why the hell would we use focus groups? But we within the research industry know that focus groups have their place and have driven a lot of good research findings. But what we seek to do is hard. Helping people see into the future is incredibly hard. It's hard to get the trust to bring others on that journey, and that's why there's many cases such as this where we have a design here that completely has left the customer out of this, and the customer responds by doing what they want to. Was there research conducted in this case? I don't know. Maybe was the researcher listened to? I don't know. But the end result is still we haven't got the outcome that suited both the business and the customer. And it's not to say we don't have wins. We have lots of wins, but there's also lots of things that could be done better. And we know that in the research industry over the last few years, there's been an enormous improvement in technology and new methods. NewMR people particularly would be aware of all of these sorts of things. But while these improvements have happened, I actually think we can do research now faster, quicker, and more accurately than ever before. But, are we focusing too much on the process and the process improvements, and are people forgetting what we're about, which is to help people understand customers? So while we recognise all the progress we're making, we're focusing internally, whereas perhaps we have to look externally to keep in line. And I think as a client, I've learned over the years that there's no one-fit solution, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, MROCs, focus groups, gamification. Each of those comes with their own pros and cons, but they also, success comes for research, particularly when we've done our most successful jobs. It's been taking a little bit of each of these and moulding up a solution right for whichever the problem was at the time. And, to be frankly, a lot of people, if they're selling MROCs, every solution is an MROC. If they're selling focus groups or quals or quants, we can't afford to be in this position where each represent one tiny structure of research. We need to look as research as a whole. And I think part of my belief is that BE should be part of and included as one of those tools. So let's just go back. So what is it that behavioural economics is? So BE attempts to identify the unseen forces that guide our behaviour, a collection of biases, heuristics or shortcuts, the social influences and the contextual influences that underpin decision making and the behaviour of all people. And where would we be without them? Surely we'd grind to a halt. Subconsciously we can process at around 11 million bits per second, while consciously we process at only 15 to 16 bits. System 1 and System 2, as you like, and System 2 or deep thinking is hard, and no wonder we need to focus and concentrate on that. So much of the world's, our interaction with the world goes on without our conscious thoughts. And as researchers, we know answers because we have all sorts of tools and methods that we go beyond just asking questions. But it still calls us into question to consider these things which have been outside our thought for a lot of the time that I've been a researcher. And that's why I jumped so heavily into this space. So these forces are based in evolution, so they're incredibly powerful. And they're always present and something we need to acknowledge and plan for whether we like it or not. And it's the human in our behaviour, and that's what research is all about, bringing the person to life for our clients. So BE is definitely in a researcher's remit. It's a wolf if we ignore it, and an opportunity if we embrace it. So what should you do? So BE provides additional tools and frameworks to help you to do your job. So at least it's a broad body of science-based work that we can use to help inform us when we're thinking of our own solutions. With Dan Ariely shows the predictability of the forces, which allows for the development of frameworks and models we can use also to guide us. Like this one, the EAST framework is one I like from the BIT team in the UK. So it's a very simple framework, and even if you don't know a lot in depth about behavioural economics, you can use this to look at the solutions you're coming up with for your end clients and just test. If it's easy, things like harnessing the power of defaults, reducing hassle, simplifying messages, these are things that have been around for a while outside of this framework, but it's not getting the headway that it deserves. We all know things should be simple. We all know things shouldn't have hassle, but still things are created every day that hassle us, that are complex. They should be attractive. So they should attract attention. We should reward and sanction for maximum effort. They should be social, show that people perform the desired behaviour or use the power of your networks or encourage people to make a commitment to others. And timely. Prompt people when they're likely to be most responsive. Consider immediate costs and benefits. Help people plan their responses to events. This is a very simple framework, but I think it works, and we've used it particularly in my old job back at AGL, which is an energy company where I was head of insights for 9 years. We used this framework, and it was very easy for people to understand the benefits of taking this into account, and it made things easier. People actually outside of the research space are aware of the behavioural economics and are interested, and they will listen, which is a great thing. And remember to experiment. I mean, at the end of the day, researchers are experimenters, but sometimes we're just looking for an answer or a number, and but a good researcher is open to the results and they're curious. So let's not look for the simplest and quickest answers, but open up the possibility to all the possible answers. So let someone else deal with all the confirmatory research and the I need to know survey monkey type things. That's fine. I mean, we don't have to be the owners of surveys. We have to be the owners of the truth, I think. And the general interest in BE gives us an opportunity to aim higher. I found, as I just said, when I was educating our colleagues about BE, they are much more likely to allow us to experiment. So for the first time since I was there as a researcher, we were able to actually do multiple studies of the same area from different angles, combine the results, and end up with a far stronger answer than just a survey alone. And remember to focus on behaviour. So this is the model I use, which is understanding the behaviour. Use this 5-step model, look at the context, apply the BE concepts themselves, ideate, test and learn, turn around and go again. Each of these 5 stages are traditional research, and there's more interesting research, things like ethnography, which was always a good thing to do, but very expensive and hard to get clients to sign off on. Secondary research, lots of qual, lots of quant, which is our bread and butter. And that's why I think BE needs to be in the hand of researchers and trained researchers, because we can do that sort of analysis at a lot deeper level. Still use the simple things like framing and anchoring. They work, They're simple, people understand them, they're in use every day. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but don't forget there's a whole lot more. This cognitive bias codex has over 200 different biases put in. I know you can't read it on the slide, sorry, but if you want to get a copy of this, it's freely available on the internet, as is most of the BE knowledge is out there and free and available to you. With 200 concepts, it's pretty hard to understand them all, but that's why I think it's good to get someone who knows this in a lot more detail. I've used statistics and statisticians my whole life, but I'm in no way a statistician, but I've been able to leverage that by the people who do know that far better than me. And remember, these influences are everywhere. They understand the business, the biases impact on decision making, not just yours and your end clients, but also everybody you deal with. So we can use those not just in our research sense, but in our selling of the research, in our managing of getting the actionability done. What I like to say is don't leave the BE wolf at the door. I mean, I think he needs us as researchers as much as you need him to understand people more. So maybe if we get involved, we can push those wolves away. So thank you. Thanks for your time. Back to you, Sue.